Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're starting a little late, but we're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get going here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we'll have a roll call. Mrs. Sugars, please.
Mrs. Matlack.
Here.
Mrs. Neary.
Here.
Mr. Avadia.
Here.
Mrs. Seidel.
Here.
Mrs. Scarpolino. Mrs. Schultz.
Here.
Mrs. Stratton.
Here.
Mrs. Tong.
Here.
Mr. Goodwin.
Here. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash. We have a number of great recognitions tonight, and I'm going to turn it to Dr. Malash for those recognitions.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. I'm very excited that we're going to recognize, beginning tonight, we're going to recognize the National Merit semifinalists and commended students from High School East and from High School West. I'm going to ask Mrs. Wilson to join me up at the podium. And if there are any of the administrators from High School East or High School West who are here, I do see Mr. Edwards, if you would join us up there as well. And then students, after you come up and you're recognized, so Mrs. Wilson's going to go through, we're going to announce your names. We're going to come up, we'll shake hands, we'll give you a certificate. You'll walk around, shake all the board members' hands, and then all the hands on the side. And after you shake hands, you're going to go out this back door and go out back in the front by the lobby, and somebody's going to come down and take your group picture at the end. You are welcome to come back and join us for the rest of the meeting, but you certainly don't have to if you have homework and stuff to do.
Good evening. There we go. Good evening. We will start with our commended students for the 2020 National Merit Scholarship Competition. Oliver Adler. Congratulations. Calvin Aliferov. Congratulations. Lucy An. Amanda Chen. Shauna Chen. Emily Collins. Shrey Dawadi. Aditi Dofod. Alvin Eisner. Perry Gallo. Deborah Goldberg. Jacob Graff. Davy G. Cole Johnson. Congratulations. Matthew Liebman. Kartik Pejavara, sorry. Anne Pierre. Tejas Raman. Samantha Roll. Ali Shakir. Junyang Shin. Congratulations. Aiden Sims. Kiva Singhal. Henry Tao. Robert Thompson. Noah Vermes. Matthew Weinberg. And Thea Zhang. Ji Hao Zhou. And now our semifinalists, Jake Brooks. Arnav Gul. Claire Wu. And Grace Yoon.
And again, congratulations to all of the students. And now, yes, round of applause for them. That's great, right? Mr. Edwards, do you want to go out and get in a picture with the kids? And now we're going to recognize, I don't know that they're all here tonight, but we are recognizing 85 employees tonight who have a combined years of 1,865 years of service to Cherry Hill. And certainly could have been to other districts as well. One of the people that we're going to recognize tonight, and I don't know whether he's here, but her father also taught in the district. And is Mr. Butter here? Is Fred Butter here? Oh, he didn't come. Look, I printed out his yearbook pictures. So he was from the Cherry Hill High School yearbook in the spring of 1964. And then from the Cherry Hill East yearbook from the spring of 2000. So I have these. So Karen, I'll give them to you when you come up and that's okay. I certainly understand. Same thing for the adults that are being recognized. Mrs. Wilson's going to call you up. We're going to shake hands. You'll come around, shake everybody's hand on the board, and then at the side table. Then you'll slide out front to the lobby. We'll get a picture of you all. You all are also welcome to come back and join us for the remainder of the meeting, unless you have homework or other stuff that you need to do as well.
All right, so we're going to start with the 20 years of service recognition, and I think Dr. Malaj will read these fairly quickly, so we don't have to applaud between each name, and then we can move along. So we have Anna Barrios. Yes, hold your applause.
We like to celebrate.
Barbara Clark. Elizabeth Hare Cox. Elise Lynn Croce. Karen Cutler. Marianne Daly. Christopher Del Rossi. Cecilia Ilola. Susanna Esposito. Julia Farkas. Lori Ferranto. Trudy Figueroa. Laura Girdle. Gertel, sorry. Sarah Gilgore. Amy Graves. Carmela Griffo. Jennifer Heller. Lisa Jackson. Bruce Crone. Barbara Kuzan. Elizabeth Lanza. Kimberly Lasky. Lisa Levenstein-Lipman. Valerie McDonald. Melissa McNabb. Maria Medina. Regina Melchior. Kathleen Miller. Donna Morocco. Brianna Morris. John Murtha. Ellen O'Donnell. Sandra O'Donnell. Gina O. Nancy Pucci. Kathleen Richeza. Harriet Rookensrud. Alla Rose. Jody Santangelo. 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 Catherine Santoro. Andrea Savage. Michelle Smith. June Stagliano. Amanda Steuven. Gail Staub. Deborah Tackett. James Thompson. Kelly Toscano. Jill Turley. Jennifer Urban. Christina Weigel. And Rosa Zayas. All right, next we have 25 years of service, Christopher Bova. Christina Boyle. Martha Brown. Ann Bolsek. Mary D'Alessandro. Joanne DiGiacomo.
If you get a gold watch, I want one. Yeah.
Patricia Dilba. Maureen DeVetro. Derek Field. Carolyn Grossi, not sure. Louise Head. Marilyn Hyman.
25 years.
Why you set a precedent?
We're all going in.
That's right.
Arthur. Arthur Johnston.
You gotta have a little levity. You work it, kid.
Janice Jones. Alan Kritz.
Go for it, Alan. You can hug Barb.
Carol Lagamba.
I'll sit here for you. Oh, thank you.
Allison Little. Joyce Motson. Linda Pizzella. Richard Reidenbaker. Christy Robertson.
Yeah, I can retire.
Catherine Rowland.
Yeah, that's right. Come on, bring it in here, buddy. Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. All right.
Carol Sassani. Patricia Sedlak. Estelle Sharp. Dawn Slatton. Carol Solano. And that's everyone for 25 years. Okay, 30 years. Mary Bellino. Danielle Gerenzo. Sunita Oha. And Donna Steelman. That's it for 30. We're going to go with 40. So, recognizing 40 years of service. Cheryl Melleby. And Yvonne Greenberg. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. Congratulations to everybody.
Oh, gotcha. So when do we get our gold watches? 25 years, gold watches, you know, or a raise, one of the two.
That's awesome. All these national merit and employee recognition. I just want to congratulate everyone again. Next up, we have our report out for vandalism and violence and vandalism report, and Mr. Saporito is going to give us information on that next.
I've been told in the past that I'm not all that much fun to be around, but geez, that room emptied up pretty quick. Good evening, everyone. Again, for our requirement for the DOE to report to the board once a year the annual violence, vandalism, weapons, and substance abuse report. We'll be going through a couple of different screens, and at the end, we're going to go through some initiatives that have been taking place over the past couple of years. Some of them are repeats, and some of them are new, and that's exciting stuff. Don? So we're broken up into five big categories: violence, vandalism, weapons, and substances, and HIB, but also has a subcategory of alleged HIB. alleged HIB is only in its second year of existence, and you'll see the numbers coming up, how they've dropped off very, very much because of, I'll let Dr. Malash explain that when we get to it. Before we had SSDS, we had EVVRS, which is Electronic Violence Vandalism Reporting System. Had an unbelievable amount of information in it that we can pull out very, very detailed reports. And I specifically remember last year, Mrs. Matlack saying, when they come up with the new reports for SSDS, come back and present them. Well, I would have loved to, but they're still not there. I emailed them, and they keep saying the same line, that they are still being developed. I got a feeling that after this long of a period of time, they're not being developed anymore. I think this is what we're stuck with. So we went from a whole bunch of subcategories that go into each of these categories, each of the main categories, and we could see stuff like what the violence, for instance, would be broken down into sexual contact, sexual assault, aggravated assault, and so on, whatever was in that category. But we don't have it anymore, which is very, very disappointing because, as you'll see, the numbers need to be explained at times, and it's really hard to explain them when you don't have the data to pull out without taking each report individually and doing it by paper. But they're still not up with those new reports. So just as a review, I know we have a couple of newer board members. EVVRS transitioned into SSDS for the 17-18 school year. And it added, as I said earlier, the HIB alleged category. The vandalism category was changed. Burglary was taken out. Fireworks were taken out. And computer trespass was added because of the amount of technology that are in schools now. The computer systems are becoming a target. Incidents were combined in the violence category. Robbery and extortion were now one category, and it's for our purposes never used. Let's keep it that way. Bomb threat, fake bomb, and fire alarm offenses are now combined into just a false public alarm category. So, for instance, if somebody called in a bomb threat and they were eventually investigated and charged with it, it would go under that category. And the sex offenses have been broken down into two categories. They had it in like 3 or 4 before in EVVRS, but now there are 2. It's sexual assault and sexual contact, so that they align with the New Jersey Criminal Code 2C, so that what's being reported on the SSDS forms are also lining up with what complaints would be charged and what charges would be appropriate for those offenses. Substances now uses 2 categories. Substance use confirmed, which is confirmed by a test, going out and getting a blood test or urine test, and substance use expected refused exam. Before, all of the refused exams went right into the use confirmed category. Now they break that down to use confirmed through whichever medical procedure they went through, or refused exam is separate now, so you can kind of separate those. All right, here's the numbers, and initially we look at these and we get a little sticker shock on 2018-19 with the jump in the numbers. But we do a 5-year spread for a reason. If you look at the numbers in total from 14-15 to 18-19, for the most part, a little bit down in 14-15, the numbers are about the same, with the exception of that 17-18 year. Now, that was an anomaly for whatever reason. It was a very, very low year for incidents. But that still doesn't, we still want to know why the numbers in 18-19 went up a little bit. Substance use was very easy to figure out. It's vaping. As vaping kind of took a jump between 16-17 to, I'm sorry, between 17-18 to 18-19, and it's one of those, if you build the better mouse, you got to build the better mousetrap, and that now we have the buildings that's affected by that have much more knowledge, much more awareness as to where this is happening, when this is happening. So that's why you had the jump from 17-18 to 18-19. My bet is you're going to see a drop this year when we present this next year. The violence category up from the previous years, especially from 17-18. The what I found out, and I wanted to look at the incidents, even though we can't pull the data, I still wanted to look at the incidents. So I went back and looked at some of the paper incidents. We had a couple of anomalies that happened in the 18-19 year that's driving that number. One of them was our BES buildings had a lot more incidents to report than they did the year before, about 12. And most of that was staff members being, technically it's assaulted, but being confronted by the students in the BES program. That jumped a lot. Also, what I found, especially on the high school level, was a big increase in mutual fights, where two people decide they're going to fight for whatever reason it may be. And that drove the number up too. There was about, I want to say 28 more than the year before. So it did go up a little bit. Those are the reasons that I think those numbers are higher. Between the numbers being higher for 18 and 19 because of the incidents, and then 17, 18 just being a little lower for whatever reason, that's why we have those numbers. Now the HIB confirmed, it's not a big difference, but each as we go along, the investigations, the people doing the investigation, the student assistant counselors doing the investigations get sharper, they get more experience, and find more. Don, if you can go to the next one. These are the total HIBs for the last 3 years, 87, 71, 80, and then this year is 96. If you look at that next line, the total alleged HIB incidents, 18-19, which is the year we're reporting on, is 94. The year before that, 236. And I'm going to ask Dr. Malash to step in here for a moment to explain that.
Thank you, Mr. Saporito. So one of the things that we changed is the administrators have the opportunity to what we refer to as a threat assessment with HIB that does not necessarily get qualified as an HIB investigation. That when something is alleged, there's a sheet, and we built ours based on what came from the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association, something we went through and introduced to the board. And last year was the first year that we used it formally throughout the year. But what it allows the principal to do is to take what the statement or the concern that was raised and make a determination if the criteria can be met based on what the complaint is. If the criteria can be met, then it proceeds into an investigation. If the criteria cannot be met, because remember, HIB, the law is very specific about a child being targeted because of a characteristic. So if the criteria cannot be met, then it does not go through a full HIB investigation. So that is done much more frequently in the building level. Mrs. Wethington and I then have to go through each one of those threat assessments, and we sign off after the building principal signs off and then submits it electronically, but it does not count as a formal investigation for HIB. So that's where the big difference is in terms of those numbers that in the reporting. And again, as we continue to do training, the principals are better at what they do with it. Teachers are better at what they do with it. We continue to work with Zone PTA and with the PTAs so that parents have an understanding about what the policy states and what the law is, and then what we do on our end as the school.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. And down the bottom there, the bullet points, you see some of the reasons why we have such a robust HIB investigation program, the training and the programs that that are developed and that are done within the district. All right, safe school practices, and this has been a hot topic, and that's a good thing. It should be. It should be. Some of these things are the bullet points here are older, but I think they're still worth being up there. The character education, of course, is paramount. CHPD helps us out tremendously with their social media and safety presentations when the students transition to the different grade levels, to going to different from elementary to middle and from middle to high school, because there's different things that have to be addressed there. Some of these are highlighted. I want to hit them a little more than the others. Annual review of the district's crisis management plan. We had Jeff Gale, who's the director of the School Office of Preparedness for the DOE. He's the director. He took a look at our plans. There's 91 points that have to be met all of those 91 points were covered. He just made the recommendation to us that we put him in a little bit of a different format that would fall in line with the state police, what they do, and what everybody else is transitioning to. So I'm currently working on that right now. Of course, last year we expanded the campus police officer program to the middle and elementary school level. All campus police officers are armed, as we all know. CHPD continues to do visits for at each level. They walk through the buildings. If they're writing a report, they'll pull in the parking lot of the school and write the report there. Chief Monahan has been extremely helpful and extremely cooperative with this. We have mandatory training that the campus police officers have to go to, SRO for school resource officer. We don't call our officers that, but it's the same thing. School resource officer certification, everybody has to go to that. We have a little bit of a grace period. As of July of 2020, I just got done all the paperwork. Everybody will be certified through the SRO program. And de-escalation training, which is also very important. We have 2 school safety specialists, Mrs. Sugars and myself. We went through the DOE initial training last year, and this year we had to do 10 hours of refresher training in order to keep that certification. So you have the balance of the year you got it, plus the next year. So Ms. Sugars and I would have been up on December 31st, but we both have plenty of hours. And a student ID and staff photos that we always have. Everybody wears them around their neck all the time. Next on, please. Memorandum of agreement with the Cherry Hill Police Department and the Camden County Prosecutor's Office. That's legislation. It gets revised every year, mostly every year. And this, I found out over the end of last week. I had the great fortune to go to Fort Lauderdale for a conference from around the country, school safety specialists, security directors, SROs from around the country. And when Jeff Gale said the other night at the security forum that New Jersey is well out ahead of everybody, there is no doubt after spending 2 days with the people that were in the class. No doubt that we are ahead. We're talking about people that are still trying to figure out whether they should lock the doors of their school or not. And other things, it's just not enough time to go into. But we are well ahead of that. And one of the biggest issues that came up was information. School boards won't allow anything that happens at school to be transmitted to the police department. It's crazy. And we have it as the memorandum of agreement. We have to do it. And a couple of the instructors were they thought that how progressive New Jersey was, that we get to do that, get that information. We continue, bless you, we continue and we practice the monthly security drills and fire drills. Again, that's legislation. 1 security drill a month, 1 fire drill a month, and that is base. Buildings feel free to do more drills however they like. Our passive alcohol sensor program at the different dances. Next one, please, Don. The security blinds. We just installed security blinds on every interior classroom door in every classroom in the district. We're still cleaning a little bit up, but 99% of them are now covered. That does not relieve the responsibility of safe corners and getting everybody out of the way, but it's a great thing to not be able to see in the classrooms during a lockdown. Stop the Bleed program was initiated. Every campus police officer is trained how to use a tourniquet, how to use clotting agents, and how to but stop bleeding, because as they found in these incidents, the bleeding is very important. That if there was intervention in the first 5 minutes, more lives would have been saved. So we have that program. New visitor tags. If you go into a building now, you have nice big bright yellow tags with visitor numbers so that we know who's who and who's in the building. I had another great opportunity to train with the Cherry Hill Fire Department and Cherry Hill Police Department in the incident command system, which if there is any large scale or small scale event for that matter, gets put into action, and you need to know where you stand in that particular framework. So I went through that training back in, I guess it was June. We now have our own internal affairs function, which we are required to have by the prosecutor's office. And we also have another requirement by the prosecutor's office, a resiliency program that's been initiated, where one of our officers has been appointed as the resiliency officer. So if any of the other officers are having any sort of issue, they can go to him and talk to him, feeling more comfortable to go peer to peer. Of course, we have stakeholders, and you know, it starts here, and with the parents, students, teachers, staff, everybody listed there, our community, our emergency services. I can't tell you what a joy it is to work with the police department and the fire department. Well, a little jaded toward the police department since I spend most of my life there, but they're just a great group of people to work with, and the cooperation has been just fantastic. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Oh, ma'am.
I'm a data geek, so I love this, and I also work heavily with this in my career life. So in terms of our numbers in comparison to other districts of our size, we seem to be doing fairly well.
Correct.
But do we go from here, from these numbers, how do we make a plan of attack in order to address it for the following school year? I'm only asking because I know about the MOU with the district that's required with the police and all of that. So are we planning to have any representation at the Youth Service Commission? And I'm sure it's going to be mentioned probably in January when you get a certain member sitting on this board that runs it. But do we plan on being a part of that? Because that can help inform us on what actions we need to take, what community partners we need to involve in terms of bringing some of these numbers down.
Yes, and I currently sit on the Restorative Justice Committee with Assistant Prosecutor Chatton and a couple of other people that they're looking into those numbers. Why it's I'm sure you've heard of the school to prison pipeline, and that's what this is trying to disrupt. So I think that just a backlash of that will help. It's a good backlash to help trickle back into the schools. What I'm going to do, and we're only a couple months in, I think at the end of November, I'm going to take a look at the numbers and see what they're doing, and then if it seems to be something seems to be rising a little bit higher than others, we're going to take a look at it and see what it is. I don't want to say it's hit and miss, but a lot of it's very. We had one. Dr. Malash, you recall, I don't remember exactly where it was, I'm sure you would, where we had the substance abuse, and involved 16 people in one incident, and each one of them is an incident. So the numbers get artificially inflated at times. But the good thing is the weapons number you've seen up there, I believe, was 5. All 5 of those were knives that were brought into school. I believe 2 of them were the 2 children brought them in because they wanted to show them off. They were never used, they were never threatened, and 3 of them were left in a backpack that they didn't know were in there. They didn't realize were in there. But we still have to report it. Injuries are low. I don't think we had no major injuries that required EMS response to any building due to a incident from that we report.
Yeah.
So they're there, and we're going to see and make sure. I'll give it to the campus police, and we'll make sure everybody's more vigilant.
Because I definitely think it's worth us having some representation there, just so that we can get more access to outside resources.
Sure. I agree.
And then also hear what's happening in other districts, because the times that I've sat on that commission, it was kind of disheartening to keep having Cherry Hill be one of the target communities, but in comparison to our size and the other districts that are in our county, we're not at that level, but we get selected off of that list quite often because of these numbers. So I just would hope that we would get someone there that can be a listening ear and then also help us to inform on what we should do next. So
certainly.
Ms. Stratton, let me just add as well. So we've been invited, I get invited every month to the meetings that take place. The hard part with their meetings, it's the same night as our action meeting for the board. It's the 4th Tuesday of the month, so they occur at the same time. I've worked through, I had attended a meeting a couple of years ago with the county superintendent, and we had talked about it because it was one of those discussions that as the folks in the county would get together and they would talk about education, the problem with schools, and there was never anybody from any of the schools, that were there. So we do exchange information. I receive information from them. I'm optimistic that maybe the date and time of those meetings will change, moving forward, which certainly will be intriguing as well, because then we can actually have an active voice. And you do bring up a good point. So one of the things that we hear quite a bit is about Cherry Hill's numbers, especially when you talk about Camden County. The reality is the majority of the other school districts in Camden County would fit inside Cherry Hill, right? Not one or two. The majority of them would fit inside Cherry Hill. So it is a challenging discussion, that takes place because people look purely at a number. Well, your numbers are high, and I will tell you that with 11,000 kids in our school district that are in school for 182 days, 210 is a really, really low number. A really, really low number. Now, we will be high compared to the majority of the other school districts when the state produces these lists in terms of what looks at. I will tell you that I think there's an issue with how some districts report, and because it's a self-reporting mechanism, it's within the district to do to take that upon themselves. We will fit probably, categorically with, based on our size with where we are in the state, as the 12th largest district. But our numbers are probably low overall in terms of what takes place. And Mr. Saporito gives great information about individual incidents that can then skew, what those numbers look like. One of the things, and as we've talked about safety and security through the years, we talk about weapons and weapons coming into school. The majority of knives and things that are brought in are at the elementary level. And that just is. It's, the things that take place. So an ongoing discussion. Dr. Smith works with the building principals, with the high school principals, the middle school principals today. They talk about student engagement. They talk about student behavior. There's a lot of work with restorative practices that are going on throughout the district. That we're interested to see what does that look like in terms of what traditional consequence looks like within the school. And then how do we work better with kids, to address conflict. Kids struggle with conflict. They do. And they probably always will in some ways. How do we as adults help them to support that? What's it look like at home? What's it look like in the community? As has always gone on and through different ages, there are things that exist within the community that then spill over into school, that come through. And the reality of things happening just on a weekend is now things happen electronically, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. Like we've talked before at the commission level about the reporting practices, and some districts don't have the reporting practices that our district has, and so I think it's almost a good thing that we are very diligent with reporting everything. But I think because the numbers are public, people go right to what the number is and don't look at anything behind it. So I would just want to make sure we have a voice that says, wait a minute, we're totally open to whatever other services are out there to bring them in. We're not, confining ourselves, and we're not acknowledging it, but we're very open to it, and so getting there. So, and I think in terms of the meetings, you have a good chance of those being changed. Just wait till January.
How do we compare to the other larger districts in the state? Are we in line, or is it still skewed because of the reporting?
I've not looked at the other ones in the state, Ms. Neary, and probably since last winter at some point. But we fall, if I remember in terms of ranking, we probably were within the top 15 in terms of number of incidents, over the last couple of years, which is about appropriate. Again, as the 12th largest district, we're one of the largest suburban districts that's in the state. We are not out of line. And I would tell you that when you look at the list, it's shocking because, again, I believe most districts are underreported, in terms of what actually takes place. Our piece, and this is one of the things, with Mr. Saporito as the director and, with the principals in the building, is there's an authenticity of we hold ourselves accountable that if there's something takes place, we report it, right? We follow through and follow the guidelines that we're supposed to follow in terms of what's there. There's a realness to, what it is.
Also, when it comes to reporting, we're the only K through 12 district that has a police department. Campus police are responsible for SSDS, and if it needs to be reported, they're going to report it. It's not up to it, and this is no knock on anybody, on any administrator or anything, but they have a duty to report, and they're going to report everything that's required. Each one of them have the handbook that was given out when SSDS first came, and they all know what they have to report, and I think that drives it a little bit also. Mr. Goodwin.
I have a couple of questions. So the first one, I just want to understand. So if there's a fight, whether it's mutual or not, it's still recorded as an incident or is recorded as an assault, even though they may not be reported to the like Cherry Hill Police Department or something like that. They're all reported as assaults.
There's two different categories. There's assault and there's a fight. Fight is mutual. You looked at me. No, you looked at me. Come on, let's go. Kind of like a hockey fight. Okay. And that's considered a fight. An assault is where you have an unsuspecting victim. One of them that pops into my mind because I was reading a bunch of them today was somebody got hit in the head with a full water bottle. That's an assault. Okay. There was no mutualism about it. It was an assault. So that gets reported as an assault. Now, every assault gets a police report. Not necessarily every fight. Okay. But every assault will get a police report because that victim, you got to protect the rights of that victim for them to sign complaints, a criminal complaint against the perpetrator. So that needs to be documented. Okay. But the fights are generally over, what they're over in high school, and it's over in a couple of minutes, and they're sitting at the lunch table together the next day.
Okay. The other question I had, and I think I know the answer, but I just wanted to make so. The HIV alleged, that's in addition to the HIV confirmed. That so is not under that umbrella of.
I would look at it as two separate categories.
Two separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have all the HIBs come in to get investigated. Somebody alleges, and I use allege now until it's investigated, alleges an HIV incident. If it is investigated and it's found not to meet the criteria, it's an HIB alleged. If it is investigated and does meet the criteria, it falls under the HIB category. Okay. So they're really two separate and distinct categories. Just one didn't meet the criteria that needs to be met for the bullying.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Zapparino. Next, we have correspondence. I think I know Mrs. Seidel has correspondence. I think Mrs. Schultz, and we'll start out with Ms. Seidel.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The first thing I want to talk about is we recently held our Safety and Security Forum on October 29th, Tuesday at 7 p.m. at Cherry Hill High School West. And that was the first in what are a series of meetings for our Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee, which came out of the work of our previous Ad Hoc Committee. As a reminder, the video recording of the forum is available on our YouTube channel, so we hope that many of you that weren't able to join us or watch that evening can go online and take a look at that. And more importantly, you can also still submit additional questions via our online portal as well if you review the forum and have additional questions. There's also a list of the panelists' biographies on the website, and then a chart that I think is really important for people to take a look at. It is a chart showing the security and mental health support resources at each of our high schools and middle schools. It's a one-pager. It's a great resource tool, and I hope everybody takes a look and finds that on the website. Next, I want to report on, I attended the Camden County Educational Services Commission Board of Directors meeting on November 6th at 7:30. Superintendent Dan Delvecchio shared a memo with the Board of Directors where TD Bank acknowledged Colette Hoban and her Business Advisory Committee for their ongoing contribution to the Project Search program. As you guys know, I talk every month about the fabulous Project Search program that is run with TD Bank and the Camden County Educational Services Commission. So Ms. Hoban was recognized for her work. In addition, the 8 current interns and students that are in the Project Search program were recognized during National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Colette's team, along with TD Bank, work together to identify a network of employers to help place the interns in full-time jobs once they graduate from the Project Search program. And they have asked that if anybody in the Camden County community knows of businesses that may be willing to partner in this initiative in the future, to please, you could let me know, and I can share it with the CCESC team at my next meeting. We also talked about and authorized the use of competitive contracting for the mental health initiative that Camden County Educational Services Commission will be rolling out in the near future. And Cherry Hill was actually recognized during this conversation because districts like Collingswood and Cherry Hill, we have our own significant mental health initiatives already in place, but many smaller districts do not have those resources and are excited at the possibility to partner with CCESC on this project. So their goal for this project is to procure operation, management, and administrative services for program design, development, implementation, ongoing support, and outcome data analysis for school-based health behavioral services. And they hope to have a playbook available for interested districts in September of 2020. And again, our meetings are usually pretty short, and that was it. And our next meeting is on December 4th. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, back to you, Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. Any other correspondence? Mrs. Schultz.
So I just wanted to talk about the Alternative Funding Committee. So we did have our first meeting Wednesday, October 30th. So we met at 7 o'clock. It was a very informative meeting for our first meeting with the committee. We had our initial welcome by Dr. Malash, and then we opened with a quick round of introductions. Ms. Sugars talked just briefly about how both the Alternative Funding and the Safety and Security Committee and how they came to be, which both committees did grow out of recommendations from the ad hoc committee. And then we dove right into a nice packet of information that Ms. Sugars was kind enough to go over. We started with the 2019-2020 budget. We looked at a copy of the building overview for all 19 schools, which included the school name, the year that they were built, the roof area, the age of the roofs, and the enrollment for each of the 19 schools. And then we reviewed a copy of the state aid analysis from 2008 to 2020, which was great because it was a good perspective of the revenue lost over those past years. We then had a pretty thorough review on the understanding of the school's district budget, and that went through the budget submission timeline. It also took us into a deep dive of all the funds. So we looked at the general fund, the special revenue fund, the capital projects fund, the debt service fund, and then we also touched on other funds, which include things like our food service fund, our SAC, and our fundraising funds. We had a little bit of time at the end for some light brainstorming. And then we had a great suggestion from one of our committee members to set up a Google Doc so that we could stay in touch in between meetings and start to use that to share ideas. So that has been set up. It's been shared out with all of the committee members. Our next meeting is December 10th, and that's going to be with our bond council. And we can start to talk about the do's and don'ts of alternative funding as it applies to school districts. So Ms. Neary was also there. Did I miss anything? That's good. All right.
Thank you. Any other correspondence? Okay. If not, we're going to move into. Oh, Corinne. Oh,
Just a question, Ruth.
Stratton.
For the alternative funding, can people send in ideas to the committee, like if they hear of anything or know of knowledge of anything? Should they send them to you or to Ms. Neary?
We didn't send them directly to Mrs. Sugars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, we're going to move to our board committee reports, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Matlack if she would report out on the Curriculum and Instruction Committee.
Certainly. C and I met on November 4th at 6 o'clock, and we had, we started with the report cards, and the district is providing report cards through the Genesis Parent Portal. Communication will go to parents prior to release, and middle and high school report card schedules are now aligned, and the dates have been made public. And the progress reports for students with disabilities is now in the portal as well and can be accessed there. And but a paper report is still provided if the parents request it. Next up was the course of study booklet. They're in the process of updating the course of study booklet and taking a look at course proposals, reviewing those. And they're continuing with the previous format for the coming year. And our December meeting, we will get feedback on those proposals as well. And we revisited some old business about video sharing classes, and we talked about how that was done and how why that is determined to happen at some points, and the administration is aware of the scheduling possibilities to do this. We also talked about professional development is critical when using this method of instruction for the staff, because there is, although there is an adult in the room with the kids, the video sharing, the instructional teacher is not always present in the room. So that's a different way of teaching and reaching your students. We had some new business. A great suggestion was made by Mrs. Stratton to incorporate Genesis workshops for parents on how to access the report cards and use Genesis, because not everybody is in the district for a long time, and they may be new and not know how to use it. And so I think that suggestion is being taken to heart and will be looked at. So thank you. We had public comment that the electronic report cards were well received by parents, and there a question about progress monitoring reports. Are there any questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Metlack. Next, we have BNF, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Schultz to fill us in on what happened there.
Okay. So we met on Monday, November 4th at 7 p.m. We discussed the timeline for the RFP for our professional staff. This is one of the board goals for this year, is to conduct RFPs for all the professional work that is going to be done in the district. The RFPs should be released December, January, with interviews taking place in February and March. So the BNF committee will conduct these interviews. They will be done in closed session, and they will be for our architect, our solicitor, our construction management, and potentially our auditor, and that's going to be depending on the number of responses received. The environmental consultant and the school physician will not be interviewed by our BNF committee. In addition, the district is going to request a proposal for the food service management company, and this is due to changes that need to be made to the contract concerning the maintenance and purchase of our equipment. The reason this has to go out to RFP is because it's the only way to adjust the changes that are needed to the maintenance and the purchase of the equipment. The other thing that was discussed, we did discuss the Friday Backpack program and some of the questions that have arisen from this program. So Dr. Malash did explain how the backpack program came to be, and it was a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The program did serve 47 families. It ran last year from January until the end of the school year. The original grant was for $25,000, and how it worked was that students in the functional vocation program at West did manage the program by ordering food and packing the backpacks. Backpacks were delivered to the schools by the district's courier every Friday so that families would have food over the weekend. Many of the food items were purchased from the Cherry Hill Food Bank at discounted prices. I think I have to go back to my notes, but it was $25,000 was 6 months for 47 families. Some things that we talked about as well were some key things that came up was that we discussed having conversations with various community groups about providing seed money to help keep the program going instead of starting it and stopping it and starting it and stopping it again. And other options would be to provide families with gift cards for area supermarkets. Some great topics that were also discussed that had come up with leftover food and what does the district do with leftover food for daily lunch and breakfast, and whether it could be packed up or sent home with families. And it was noted that the district is not permitted to do this. We also talked about sharing tables was discussed, and where students leave their uneaten food for other students to take. And this is also problematic due to food allergies, and it's also not permitted due to health code regulations. So both of those items were also talked about. We unfortunately had no public comment, and then the rest of the meeting was held in closed session due to some confidential items that did need to be discussed. Our next meeting is December 3rd. It's at 7 p.m. Are there any questions? Oh, sorry. Mrs. Seidel.
Thank you. You mentioned that we are not permitted by code or regulation to pack up food at the end of the day. So in recent instances, we've seen in the media that there are school districts that are doing this. Is it a state-by-state regulation? Is it what is preventing us but not other districts that we may or may not have seen in the media from doing this?
Okay. I'm going to pass this one to Ms. Sugars, if that's so I don't want to relay this incorrectly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what they do in other states, but I know that in this particular state, we're not permitted to do that.
Sorry, I don't mean to belabor it, but the reasoning, is there any reasoning? Is it health issues, or it's literally just a flat-out ban? Food safety? Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Seeing none?
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Next, we're gonna get we have our HR committee report out, and I'm gonna ask Mrs. Tong to give us that info.
The district will be hiring an additional ESL teachers due to increased numbers of students requiring service in districts. The HR committee had first reading for updated policy on teacher, staff, member, and school reporting responsibility, as well as a new policy on earned sick leave, which is also a mandated policy. Both policies will have their second reading through the P&L committee in December. The HR committee also reviewed 4 revised SAC job description, which will run through the November agenda cycle. Any questions? None. Mr. Eric, back to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tong. Next, we're going to have P&L, and Mrs. Scarpolino's not here, but Mrs. Neary's going to step in and give us committee report out. Thank you.
Okay. I probably won't do it the same justice as Jane, but we had our meeting on November 4th at 5 p.m., and it was probably held in record time. I think we noted that, Dr. Smith, as well. I think it was like less than 20 minutes. So we started off with discussion and information regarding other districts' policies on food in the classrooms. This was just a general discussion item, actually, that I had brought up. There was just light conversation around that and what they had done and whether we were in line with those policies. Then we moved into first reading on commercial driver's license, controlled substance and alcohol use testing. And really, this had come up in the previous P&L where we were looking at, how many, did this apply only to school bus drivers, or did we have other CDL licensed drivers in the district, so did we need to basically include the full expanded policy? So when they looked at it, although there weren't many, we really did need to go ahead and include the full policy. So that's what that was in reference to. And then we had the second reading on several policies, two of which I believe Mrs. Tong mentioned. The first policy was use, possession, and distribution of substances. And that's referring to if someone had declined to take a test, as it then is reported as a positive. The second, we had reduction in force. It's the first reading was on the HR agenda. And then use, possession, and distribution of substances. One is for teachers and the other is for support staff, both the same policy. And then holidays, what we had there was President's Day was missing, so that was updated to the holiday policy. And then policy 6112, reimbursement of federal and other grant expenditures. This went around reimbursement needed to be 3 days from use and name change for ESSA. So there was actually some discussion around this topic because it seemed like a very short timeline and how we could meet that. But it has to do with not basically flooding all of your grant expenditures in at one time at the end of the year. So as 3 days from when you use it, you need to file for reimbursement. And then we had bus driver, bus aid responsibility, which was revised. And that was really around language changes from disabled to special needs. Nothing else changed in the policy other than that language change. And then transportation of special needs students also changes from disabled to special needs. We then opened it up to public comment. And a member of the audience mentioned that we should move the food discussion should also be taken back to the Cultural Proficiency Committee, since it could have implications and involve, for example, children with various religious backgrounds and implications in that. So that is going to be a takeaway and discussed at Cultural Proficiency. And then there was a brief discussion from another member in the audience regarding the lunch policy. They had a simple question, and there was a bit of back and forth dialogue. That's it. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Neary. And last but not least, we have our strategic planning, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Seidel to inform us of what happened there.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. The Strategic Planning Committee meeting took place on Monday, November 4th at 8 p.m. And as we did the previous month, and as we'll do for the rest of this school year, we will highlight school buildings at each of the meetings, and we'll review work that's been done in the buildings during the past 2 years, work that's currently being done in the building, and what needs to be done in the immediate future. And this month we focused on Johnson, Kilmer, and Knight. And I'll just briefly hit some of the highlights that we covered. The full presentation is in the Friday packet that you guys all have access to, and it will also be made available to the public after this meeting tonight. So we started out talking about Johnson. Just some of the highlights: it was built in 1966, and it had additions in 94 and 2000, and has a current enrollment of 455 students. Over the past 2 years, there's been a focus on tree cleanup and roof leak repairs. Some current work that's going on at this school is emergency generator, additional roof leak repairs, and main entrance security cameras. And then just some of the highlights. There's many needs, but some of the highlights for future work would be the security suite. Again, the definition of security suite would be the security vestibule, interior and exterior cameras, door entry system, and main office alterations. And then one of the larger projects for this school would be the addition of a new multi-purpose room. Would be adding 4,820 square feet. Their current APR is one of the, I believe it's the smallest in the district at only 2,350 square feet, and that current APR would be reconfigured. There's also some toilet room alterations, small group instruction renovations, and again, there's a detailed list that you can all read through on the PowerPoint. Next, we moved into Kilmer, built in 1968, additions in 2000, and a 446 student enrollment. So over the last 2 years, there were new exterior doors installed and main entrance walkway. Current work, HVAC in the media center, main entrance security cameras, roof leak repairs, and as some of you recently saw during our tours, the building refurbishment, which included paint, lighting, classroom furniture, floor refinishing, and then window hardware replacement. Some of the future needs in this building are, again, the security suite, toilet room alterations in the classrooms, the nurse's office, and the faculty areas, roof replacement, curb, sidewalk, and paving, and replace an accessible ramp at the side door. Our third school that we covered was Knight, built in 1964, with additions in 1994 and 2000, with an enrollment of 387 students. Over the last 2 years, there was backstop replacement, roof leak repairs, soffit and fascia replacements. Some current work include emergency generator, main entrance security cameras, again, roof leak repairs, window hardware replacement, and exterior door replacement. And future needs, again, in this school, we would look to do a security suite and another new multi-purpose room, taking them up to a 4,800 square foot multi-purpose room and reconfiguring the current all-purpose room, which is only 2,340 square feet. Again, one of the items would be small group instruction room alterations, replacing domestic water distribution, electric service upgrade, and an elevator in this building. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 3rd, and at that meeting, we're going to focus on Kingston, Woodcrest, and Man. We had, I believe, one member of the community who joined us. And, before I go into that, we did sort of dive into a little bit of a discussion, as we did last month, about school boundaries and the need for all 12 elementary schools. According to our implementation strategy and timeline plan that we received over the summer, that conversation will be held in more depth in January, I believe. We're slated to have that conversation. So we sort of tabled the conversation for another month or two. We had one member of the public who had some questions about why some of the elementary schools were proposed to get new all-purpose rooms and some were not, and it was basically due to size. And again, I think that is it. Our next meeting is December 3rd. Any questions? Mr. Goodwin.
I didn't really have a question, but one thing I did want to point out, and I thought was really good, and just another plug for the security forum that took place, because in that security forum, it did talk about the idea of having the importance of that vestibule, the security vestibule, as far as best practice goes, and how that actually was able to stop some incidents where people had the security vestibule, where some actual incidents were able to stop. So I'm glad that that's still a part of what we have in the plan for the schools as we move forward. But just another plug for those that didn't attend the security forum, definitely get online and take a look.
Any other questions? Okay, and I apologize, Dr. Malash, if you'll cover this. We didn't discuss this in strategic planning, but because it's regarding strategic planning, I thought I would just remind everybody about the strategic plan forum on Thursday on November 14th. There is one in the morning at 9:30 here in the boardroom at Malberg, and then also another meeting in the evening, 7:30, in the large group instruction room at Beck Middle School.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. Next, we are going to have our first public comment. At this point, there's going to be two opportunities for public comment. This first public comment is for agenda items only. So we have an action agenda, so you would direct your comments on those items on the action agenda. There will be another public comment section for any topic at the end of the meeting. So if you'd like to speak, please identify the agenda item you're speaking to, speak into the microphone clearly and state your name and address. And also, you'll be able to see your time up on the screen here in terms of you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and the timer behind you will let you know when your time is up.
Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road. I don't have the agenda item because there are no agendas available, so I didn't, or at least the one when I walked in, there was none available. If there are, I apologize. But I just wanted to address some of the, if I can, if this is the right time, the information Mr. Saporito presented. Is this the right time to address that? On the agenda? Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure where it was. So anyway, I really want to say I think it's, great to hear that our numbers are not astronomical for the size of our district. I think that also can be seen as another way. The fact that we have high numbers because of our size means that we have a wonderful opportunity to impact the students who are showing up on those numbers. And it's quite honestly, I think, I think inspired by Dr. Malash has said this more than once. I know he said it in a meeting, a private meeting we once had years ago, that every year of a student's educational career is important. I might have said that wrong if I paraphrase it wrong, but every year counts essentially. And I guess I apply that to the numbers as well. Every student, even though you look at data and it's important to look at the big numbers, it's also important to think about every student who's behind that, and they count as well. And I think anything that our district can do to help intervene when we see our students struggling. We saw the presentation about our statewide testing scores, which are very concerning. Some of those numbers, especially the way they're significantly dropping in minority populations, and especially the numbers on the middle and high school level on some of our West Side schools. We should be intervening as any way possible, rather than being happy that our some of our high scores are high. That's wonderful, but we also really have to intervene with those students. And I have good news. I looked it up. It looks like the Youth Services Commission actually meets at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, November 19th in Cherry Hill. So hopefully nobody has to wait till January for the meeting to be moved, because it's at a reasonable hour. It doesn't, I don't know if that interferes with other meetings, but it doesn't seem to interfere with the BOE meeting. So that's good news. Anyway, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I will take this opportunity to say that one of the other things that Mrs. Seidel shared just a little bit earlier and was at the security forum was just the list of services that are available at the high school, middle school, and also elementary school level in terms of being able to get counseling and counselors that are there to help students. So hopefully that is one of the ways that we have in place that can really help in terms of intervention when it comes to violence and the reasons behind those. So, any other comments? If not, we're going to go ahead and move into our action agenda. And for curriculum and instruction, I'm going to ask Mrs. Matlack to move those items, please.
Thank you very much. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2019-2020 school year. 2, approval of out-of-district student placements for the 2019-2020 school year. 3, approval of an agreement between the Cherry Hill Board of Education and the Gloucester County Special Services School District to provide an educational interpreter with sign language. 4, approval to amend ESEA fiscal year 2019-2020 budget to reflect carryover. 5, approval to amend IDEA fiscal year 2019-2020 budget to reflect carryover funds. And we have an additional item on our yellow sheet at your place, approval of special education settlement agreement. Do I have a second? Mrs. Schultz. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Avadia?
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes.
Mrs. Stratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Tong?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. Next, we have our BNF items, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Schultz to move those items, please.
The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of bill list. Number 2, submission of comprehensive maintenance plan in M1. Number 3, transfer of current year surplus to reserves. Number 4, resolution for the award of bids. Number 5, resolution for the award of transportation. Number 6, resolution for the award of contract renewals. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack, are there any questions? Mrs. Neary?
Regarding the comprehensive maintenance plan, the amounts we had listed by year and then by school, and I think it was like a roughly 2.5 million for the year. How do we come to the right number to adequately maintain the buildings in the district? Like, how do we arrive at that value?
So it's all driven by our budget codes, and those numbers are derived from the 261 sequence, which is the maintenance sequence in our budget. 262 is custodial, 263 is grounds, but they're focusing on the 261 sequence. And so basically what we do is we take those numbers and we divide it by square footage to come up with a per school number. We are required to make sure that we are spending a certain threshold, and that's determined on the M1 sheet that we fill out that goes with this, but also making sure that we don't go over a certain threshold, and that's determined by our long-range facilities plan. So this form came to be years ago when districts were, because of budget constraints, foregoing maintenance and focusing on academic programs, and it was an effort to make sure that you were allocating a certain amount of your budget towards maintenance each year. So those numbers are based on those calculations that we do on the M1, and then, like I said, the upper threshold, which is a huge number, is based on your long-range facilities plan.
So we couldn't necessarily put in a higher number.
Well, the number for your long-range facilities plan is huge.
Oh,
So
okay.
you could put in higher numbers. We basically what we do is we look at what we actually spent in 17-18, what we budgeted for 18-19, and then what we estimate we'll spend next year. So the 18-19 numbers we won't know for sure until the close of this school year. The 19-20 we won't know for sure until we finish the budget process. But they want to make sure to see that we are in fact keeping up at some level with our maintenance expenses.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions.
Mrs. Schultz?
I need to abstain to Beata Home Health on the bill list. Yes to the rest.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Avadia?
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Stratton?
Yes.
Mrs. Tong?
I'm going to abstain the submission of comprehensive maintenance plan. Yes to the rest.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Next, we have our HR items, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Tong to move those items, please.
All right. The superintendent recommend I move the following. 1, termination of employment certificated. 2, termination of employment non-certificated. 3, appointment certificated. 4, appointments non-certificated. 5, assignment salary change certificated. 6, assignment salary change non-certificated. 7, other compensation certificated. 8. Other compensation non-certificated. 9. Affiliation agreement. 10. Action consent to approve human resource negotiation item number 14.1 to 14.9. And then I have the following, the pink sheet, on the superintendent. Okay, 1, termination of employment certificated. 2, termination of employment non-certificated. 3, appointment certificated. 4, appointments non-certificated. Do I have a second? Oh, Ms. Lisa Sadell. Is there any questions? See none, Mrs. Sugar?
Mrs. Tong,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Neary,
Yes.
Mr. Avadia,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mrs. Stratton,
I have to abstain on 13.2, 13.7, and 13.4, and then yes to the rest.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Tong. Next, we have P&L items, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Neary to move those, please.
Okay, thank you. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying investigation decisions. Number 2, action consent to approve policy and legislation. Okay. Oh, that's it. Wow, it's really brief. Do I have a second? Mrs. Schultz, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. Mrs. Sugars?
Mrs. Neary,
Yes.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mr. Avadia,
Yes.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes.
Mrs. Stratton,
Yes.
Mrs. Tong,
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Neary. We don't have any items for the strategic planning, so we're going to go ahead. 22. Oh, so we're going to have our second public comment. At this point in time, you can comment on any item, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. We just ask that you state your name and address as you start.
Hi, Stephanie Graff, 514 Queen Anne Road. I'm zone PTA treasurer, and so we're getting ready to do our holiday drive where we'll be asking all the families to collect gift cards, ideally ShopRite, Walmart, and Target, to give to our needy families in the district. So just wanted to put that out there for you guys if you don't hear about it from your PTAs. But I did a simple search for food waste in New Jersey, and Rutgers has a guide to reducing food waste in New Jersey's K through 12 schools. And it actually gives a case study of New Brunswick, and they actually have become a model of food waste reduction and recovery in the fall of 2018. They do, let's see, food was recovered. So they do, they piloted lunchtime share tables. Any food remaining on the share tables after the school lunch periods, school was distributed to a local soup kitchen, which then redistributed it back into the community. So as a result of this pilot program, 3,871 pounds of food were recovered and redistributed back. So clearly these programs exist and can be done in New Jersey. So, I mean, it's a simple Google, it's Rutgers. You can just Google food waste in New Jersey. So I think it's happening. I don't know what laws we're following that it can't happen here. So I think if you guys could look into that and I guess explain why we can't do it here, because it's piloted in other school districts in New Jersey. So, thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Podowitz. I live at 110 Kilburn Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. 2 articles that I read. One is called 9th District Legislators Lambast State school aid cuts demand reform for funding formula. And what they wrote was, school districts in our area would be among the hardest hit anywhere in New Jersey, with our Ocean County schools suffering a net loss of nearly $4.4 million in this funding year. The legislature wrote, and they found that these cuts were unconscionable. That's recent. In another article from that area, New Jersey school aid, suburban districts pummeled, higher taxes and layoffs unlikely, and that's from the Asbury Park Press, April 5th, 2019. One school district they mentioned was Middletown, New Jersey, and their taxes are going to go up significantly with the cuts. Their taxes will go up, I think, $66 per house, and right now it's $5,828 on a home worth $444,180. For comparison, Cherry Hill, the average home is worth about $224,000, or about half what the average home in Middletown is, and our taxes are $5,000. That's school taxes we're talking about. So they feel that this is punitive to their district, and I guess I would agree, but our taxes are much, much higher when you figure out that their houses are worth twice more. What I'd like you to do is please, on your website, put the article from Cherry Hill Public Schools that was dated March 20th, 2007, testimony of Sharon S. Joshio, Cherry Hill Board of Education. It's interesting. And what she said was, when it comes to cuts, that our single year cut in 1990 was $5.3 million just for Cherry Hill, and then over the next 8 years we lost an average of $1.3 million a year. Or back in 89-90 for the next 8 years, we lost a total of $10 million. That's a lot. And then she called for increases. In the article, it's really good. Middletown is mentioned. This was back from 2005, 2006 data. They were getting more per child than we were, though they weren't doing great. They were getting $1,889 per student, and we were getting $1,291. You know, the Christie cuts, this was the Florio cuts. The Christie cuts, I think we were down to $800 a student. We lost $3.9 million from the previous year because we were saving for a rainy day, which is good economics, but not to Christie. He took that money, and then we lost another $8 million. So then, and that was about 8 years ago, we lost a total of, again, I think close to $12 million. So please put that article up.
Thank you.
Yoni Yair, 329 Cherry Hill Boulevard. This has been on my wife's and my agenda for a while and just forgot to bring it up at both C&I and P&L. In South Brunswick, which is where my wife grew up, they do homework-free holidays for 4 times a year, where it's a complete blackout of long-term assignments and other things. It'd be interesting if we could look into that as a school district to enable more family time during that time period, so kids aren't just sitting at home working on long-term projects or worrying about crazy tests as soon as they get back from a break. That time off is important for everyone, teachers, students alike, so just see what we could do about that. It seems people like to go to social media instead of contacting the school district. That happened again tonight during this meeting. A concern was raised about construction over at Russell Knight and West going on during second shift. For those of us who attend way too many of these meetings, we know second shift and third shift is when we do construction, so it's not impacting the kids, and there's no safety concerns going on. So we could better communicate that out to the community that that's what's going on. I know that West and Russell Knight are both very close. There is not much of a setback from the community that they're in, whereas East also has construction going right now, but there is much more of a setback from the community that surrounds East. So I can see that definitely being a challenge going on. But just how we can better communicate that out and also get people to stop posting first on social media and encourage people to respond. I know my wife and I have sent emails, and you're really great at it, getting back to us at crazy hours in the morning and things like that. So we appreciate that and would encourage others that email really does work, pick up the phone and things like that, and you are very responsive. So thanks.
All right, thank you.
Kartik Pajavera, 9 Artisan Way. So at East, every month we have a full SGA meeting where all the SGA representatives and officers from every class all meet up and talk about class updates as well as school SGA updates. And also Jacob gives, he talks a little bit about what's going on within the Board of Education and what we hear about. But sometimes that's not enough, and all we hear about is what you guys talk about. You guys are more knowledgeable about what's going on because you guys are the Board of Education and the administration. I remember last year, Dr. Malash and Dr. Smith came to East for town hall meetings and invited some of the class officers, student government officers, and some other kids that are involved as well. I was wondering if we can also have that again this year, because at the last SGA meeting, there were some questions about what some specific things going on within the Board of Education, like the lunch policy, and we were able to answer them. But I feel like students would be more assured if they heard from you guys specifically, and just any other questions they have as well that maybe we wouldn't be able to answer. But just maybe like a meeting every so often, just go to the high schools and talk about updates within the board and just answer students' questions about what's going on, because many students are, they want to be involved. They want to know what's going on within the administration and Board of Education, and they don't hear about it unless they hear about it from us. So please do that. It would really reassure the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Oh, I'm gonna. I just want to answer one question, and then I'm going to turn it to Dr. Malash to talk about the remainder items here, if he has any updates. But I just wanted to point out that we are now on a paperless agenda. That's probably why you didn't see any paper back there. And actually, you can log on to your smartphone. It's up here, but you can also log on to your smartphone to join the meeting, or smartphone, laptop, and to join the meeting in that way, as well as the agenda that's up here. So just wanted to throw that out and point that out. We're trying something new. Hopefully this will be, people will catch on and be able to really follow along in that way.
Yes.
And just to add, the agendas are still posted in advance of the meeting too, just now electronically in a different spot. I believe you still go under under agendas, but you just click on a different link instead.
Thank you, Ms. Seidel. And so I'm going to turn it to Dr. Malash to answer any of the public comment questions he can.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. So Kartik, I agree. One of my favorite things to go out and to meet with students. I actually started last week. I was with students at Carusi. I'll be at West tomorrow. And my first town hall over at East is December the 6th. So Mr. Davis and Dr. Perry should have all of the dates. There are 3 of them that are scheduled. If there's other things going on, I'm always willing to come over, additionally to, as long as we can set it up to do that. But it's always a highlight for me just to hear about what's taking place. I do something similar with the teachers. I go out and I meet at the schools. We set up. So I try to do at least 3 with the students, and then I do the teachers twice during the year. I do the custodians. So yes, absolutely. We will take a look at Ms. Kraft, the article that you shared. If you will send that to me, just send me the link. We'll go through and take a look at it, see what it actually, what it is that they say. At the secondary level, for sure over the last 15 years, we typically share information with the staff about homework assignments over holidays. That we do believe that holidays, and Dr. Smith, I know, is something that he's discussed with the secondary principals, that it is time for family. Certainly there are ongoing or long-term assignments that may be, but we're not looking for people to assign something the day before winter break that's due after winter break that goes through. Everybody needs that. Staff needs that. Families need that. Children need that. A time to rejuvenate and to be together to go through. And if I can figure out a way to get people to contact us rather than posting on social media, I will send postcards for my book tour to do that. But yeah, we remind people all the time. That with the Zone PTA folks this morning. It seems like a long time ago, but it was just this morning in here. Yeah, we always would much rather people, if people have questions about what's going on in the district, the best place to source that information is at the district. There's a lot of, unfortunately, misinformation, and I say it all the time, and it's, folks don't always let facts get in the way of strongly held opinions, and sometimes social media can be an echo chamber that goes through, that just the perpetuation of a question that goes out, and either misinterpreted or misresponded to just kind of grows. So we always want people to contact us, and we will follow up. Always we appreciate that when they do. The districts, Dr. Potowitz, you brought up about the districts and the funding and some of the work that's gone on that they've done, since back in the spring, some of the overfunded districts that then took a cut this year. There are groups much in the same way that we have the fair funding groups that have been involved. I continue to we meet with our legislators, we meet with the fair funding group, Mrs. Wilson, the fourth Thursday of the month, except for November, when it's going to be the 21st, which is the third Thursday at 7 p.m. in this room. Cherry Hill Fair Funding does meet. It is a robust organization. We're always looking for people to be involved, and it's keeping that voice going forward. We do with our legislators. Actually met with our Congressman Norcross last week. It's one of the things that we talked about with school funding, both that comes from the federal level and what exists at the state level, and we'll continue to be involved there. And I'll find out, Ms. Stern, you mentioned about the year service meeting being at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'll find out what that is, because I can tell you you sent it to me. Thank you. Yeah, send me the link or send me what it is that you found. They say the one that I continuously get invited to is Tuesday in the evening, and typically it's a 5 o'clock start with dinner, and then the meeting that occurs right after that, which conflicts with us. I think that's all of them.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. And now we're going to have I'm going to ask for a motion to go back into exec session. We're going to have an executive session to discuss legal matters, but we will not be making any decisions. We won't be coming back to make any decisions, so they'll take any action as a result of that. So can I have a motion to go exec?
I so move.
Mrs. Matlack and Mrs. Schultz. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming out.